obelisk. The obelisk is the key.
Good evening and welcome to the Obelisk. Tonight's guest is Enna Reittort, right? I still screwed it up. Enna is.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. She doesn't care. Enna Reittort is a Reittort, like I forgot what she said. Right. is a traditional culture anthropologist, PhD, Dr. Enna, a linguist, a regenerative farmer, a contemplative meditator. She lives in a village in Southeast Asia. Enna, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
I am
It's
so
a treat for me to be on.
thrilled. Enna, my love, I just adore you so much. We have not had much correspondence of late. It's crazy, but you are a magical being. And I think for me, when I consider you, first and foremost, you're a magical being, and that is the top of your bio for me. So yes, as Jerry said, welcome to the Obelisk.
Ooh, well, I hope we climb the obelisk in good order. With or without the magic that you attribute to me. I mean,
well,
I think, nowadays
emanates.
we have to, thank you, darling. But I mean, nowadays we have to work hard for recovering that magical stuff that was our birthright all
Yes.
that time ago.
Yes. And, this is kind of a little bit on par with what we were talking about earlier. And these energetics we're now swimming in, that we are just having to, whether we like it or not, find a way to navigate through these new fields. And as you were talking about with the copper, but I want to go back. So we'll bring in people. I feel that this is something important to address. So you have had an unusual rainstorm, but the difference in your dusting, there's an oil quality. Now, I've been kind of following a narrative similar to this, and they've introduced, of course, the fourth state of water, which has an oil component to it. It's gel-like. And I'm experiencing and seeing this new oil kind of factor everywhere. So could you bring us into the loop of what you're experiencing there?
Well, there again, I mean, you're mentioning the fourth phase of water, which is basically, it's that colloidal phase, which is essential to life, actually. I mean, that's Jerry Pollack has clearly shown that, the what he calls the exclusion zone is that edge where water is no longer completely that, the liquid thing that we normally are acquainted with. And it feels to me like a kind of matrix in the, in the generative sense, where stuff can happen, as opposed to, when water or fluids are just flowing. Well, they're flowing, they're carrying their information and their, energy charge and whatever it is that they're carrying. But there needs to be some kind of not solidity, but kind of stability for that to start interpenetrating with whatever medium or tissue or whatever is dialoguing with the water. Now, this greasiness feels like, oiliness, greasiness is not the same as being colloidal. Colloidal basically it's glue. It's the stuff that glues things together. And oiliness, well, it's got this grimy feel to it. And it, very unfamiliar. I'm, for years and years I've been living here, and I'm familiar with the the kind of dust, the flavor, the texture of it that we have every, the hot season before the monsoon starts. But this stuff, I mean, well, it's not as if I had to scrape it with a wire brush, but it was just, sticky, unfamiliar. And there was this oppressive feeling that everybody felt. The people of the village here said, and God knows they've known heat, from one year or decade to the next. They've been through it in this part of the world, but they have never experienced this kind of heat. And, for them, it's difficult. But I'm just perceiving from the way they're speaking that it's a qualitative difference as opposed to a quantitative difference in degrees. Because my thermometers were saying, yeah, okay, 40 centigrade, that's what, 100, and around 100 Fahrenheit. Oh, no big deal. But the crushing quality of this heat, it was just, it felt wrong. It felt not generated by nature, unless nature, perhaps needed to take charge of something, and to process it, it was necessary to ramp up the heat. I mean, I'm going into speculation, but there was something happening. But the weird thing is, for me at any rate, after the first couple of weeks of being completely sort of crushed and flat out, it kicked in a kind of instinctive, subtle reaction in me. I'm not going to say spiritual because it's another loaded word. And I became hyper energetic. And it's like I was riding the wave of this extreme heat and started doing stuff, clearing out the house, the junk, the this, that, and the other, and getting into the copper thing. So what this brings to mind is that in this phase, we need to be able to take in the crappy energies and convert them to our benefit, and be able to ride the wave of what they're, ride the surf of what they're giving us, rather than, and I think, that's more like the martial arts way of dealing with this, instead of, fighting and, resisting. With this kind of, the intensity of what is coming our way, physically, cognitively, emotionally, spiritually, you name it. It's, we need to be able to take the poison in and alchemize it and use it as fuel. Did I answer your question, Nish?
You did. And I love how you bring this into how can we make this work, because really, truly, it's everywhere, whatever this is. And I do see the distinction between the fourth state of water, but I find it interesting that they threw it out and introduced the new fourth state of water in the last couple years. And then all of a sudden, we're seeing these minute changes in a lot of different things. And now I've encountered this greasiness. It does not feel beneficial. It feels burdensome, and it feels kind of, if I may say, sleazy. And I know that's a weird word to put with it, but it just is not, I'm not happy with it, and I'm noticing it. Also, there's something else going on here, and that now this is the second year in a row I've noticed it. During our rainy season, which is the winters here where I am in the Pacific Northwest, we're certainly used to rain, and the ground here has certainly been used to rain for however long. I mean, imagine. So it always sinks in, and however it's structurally set up, it's set up in a way where the ground has a capacity for these great amounts of water at this time. And the last 2 years, it's been pooling and not sinking into the earth. And I have
Yeah.
beautiful, loomy, rich soil here because I allow everything I practice basically permaculture. And so, I'm in a little healthy bubble. My yard is, at least, of course, it's leaching off of others, but I've never seen it here, and it's happened here. And then there has been an oily look on the surface of it in the
Yeah.
ponds and stuff. And I'm concerned about that. And it has that same energetic signature that feels really gross, slimy, sleazy.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about everything that has to come in contact with it, all the animals that drink it, the food we're trying to grow in our yards. And I don't know, do you have an idea? I realize, and you know this with me, we get into the world of speculation. So opinions and speculation for me are where we get to deeper ground. But do you have an instinct about why this may be coming on now? And of course, this will bring us probably into weather patterns that are not natural, of course, weather warfare and all that.
Well, my
Possibly.
understanding is, I don't know whether they classify oils as colloidals, because basically oils and glues are not, chemically, it's not the same, or electrochemically, it's not the same creature. But, with this whole excitement about, easy water, colloidal water, fourth phase, anything that is good for life, as is the fourth state of water, can be weaponized against life. I mean, you can look at anything and everything, and anything can work, towards the so-called positive or towards the so-called negative. And what I find interesting in all this is this question of polarization, where people, modern humans, get all excited and all motivated by the good versus bad aspect of things, of anything, which is why with this business of the water that is dirty, greasy, sleazy, does this have to do with the phenomenon of, is it because there are particles or whatever frequencies or whatever harping, ionospheric heating? I don't think we don't have the answers to that, but at least we know the words and we know that these nasty things exist. But basically, could they attach certain things or certain frequencies to the colloidal, virtuous, let's say, fourth phase of water, to turn it, the most utterly life-giving substance, transporter of vital information, to turn that into a weapon against life? Yeah, absolutely, completely, very much their thing. So then, it behooves us to find the creativity in ourselves and in all the different things that we study to restore balance into this thing. I mean, the whole thing about the esoteric that runs the world is because it is the perversion of the natural magic of life, the natural magic of the cosmos, as I understand it. And this for me is not speculation. But they've perverted it, which means they've only got a certain percentage of it. Once you start perverting and you start doing krivda, you start making truth crooked, you're not holding the full potency of true truth. So I think, there again, this brings me back to not just plain fighting, because we don't have the tools to fight on that terrain. don't have the perverted sense of esoteric or magic, the magic of life. We just have the intrinsic reality of it in us that has been weaponized against us also, inside us. So do you see where I'm going with this? I'm not going probably in exactly the same place as you are, but I, definitely living out here, we don't have the kind of, really, really heavy, constant onslaughts that you've been having in North America, for decades. The chemtrailing here is much less. But I'm glad that I knew about it, because I could recognize that there was something, not right with the particular onslaught that we've just had, which is really unprecedented. So to come into this, I really think it's really, 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 really absolutely crucially essential for us to recover what is naturally ours. And and we may, science and the good scientists, the whistleblowers, they give us indications. And then, as better than I do, how much one has to go deep into one's own sort of, that inner chamber to let this stuff percolate, and to let the innate wisdom of life, give us the answers.
Yeah. And this actually touches upon your latest book as well, and the process of the nothingness. And there's so much here. I don't even know where to start. But what I wanted to get at is the fact that I think now all over the realm, people are really beginning to notice that there is a manipulation at hand in places where it wasn't so apparent, like where you are. The subtleties here and there. And you're in the third world. And as you said, we are starting to become the third world here. And, or, you didn't use those exact words, but it is something to think about as we move forward through all these changes, because inevitably, I think the amping of this stuff that seems very difficult to navigate is somehow got a timing to it. And for me, Enna, there is something magical going on with a lot of us, and everyone, I think, has the potential to get into this wave and allow it to breathe them, as you say, and just and move into that space, and then plug and play whatever this is that is trying to interfere with our natural waves, our natural instincts, our natural hearing that is beyond our physical hearing, and all this stuff that is really for the first time in my life. And you're my elder, so I'm sure you are recognizing this more than I. You at least have a longer view of this, that something truly, truly gigantic, I want to say gigantic, is happening. And it's hard to navigate how nasty the Steiner thing, that like the 8 spears coming down upon us, like this idea that we are hatching into something beautiful, into something more beautiful. And these energetics are feeding upon that process. I'm not sure I have the language to convey exactly what I'm trying to say here, but I think you may have an idea of what I mean.
Well, I mean, like many of us, I definitely have a sense that, we're having to go through this tunnel. It's, it's a kind of initiation. We are being forced into an initiation. And, those of us who have already had flavors of initiation earlier than, this particular phase, are somewhat in a better position to, keep their balance through this particular phase. And then, some of us are reassuring the masses, with the bit about we're going into the age of Aquarius and it's all going to be wonderful and we're going to be constructing the world that we want. Yeah, but if we're going to be able to construct something good, well, perhaps we need to have some skills and expertise, and we have to have some kind of abilities that are not something that you're going to pick up, at the last minute from a, whatever, for dummies book, So there is this collective wave that is picking up more and more of us. But, we shouldn't be blind to the fact that we've been weaponized against ourselves for millennia. And particularly effectively, since the Industrial Revolution and the invention of social engineering. The refined forms that they're using now, which once you look at them from outside, they are not at all refined, but they're more refined than putting shackles on you and torturing you and whatever, quartering you on the rack. So, they no longer need to torture us physically to be able to get at our mind and soul. They can extract the soul even without the physical torture. And that's the spookiest part of it, really. And it tells me that that in many of us, including some of us who think that we are awake, the connection between the soul and the body is, a tad flimsy, shall I say? Everybody's talking about, oh yes, soul, it's all about soul work and soul this, that, and soul this, that. And, the more they talk about it, the more I get a sense that they haven't a clue what this soul thing feels like. There is this huge inheritance that we have from the Christian religion where, we know that we have a soul. Western people, Christian people, post-Christian people, New Age people. Whereas people in the third world, it's no big deal for them. It's there's still more of an organic completeness to the human being, especially in the lower strata of society, which is where I've been dwelling for the past 25 years. They don't need to talk about the soul because, like, they don't need to talk about what they believe in. The whole business of belief that is such a big thing in the West. False beliefs, true beliefs, these people don't, it's not a matter of belief. They have a sense of what is and they have a sense of what isn't. It's being very, very effectively perverted, nowadays with education, TV, and consumerism and all that, which is, it's everywhere around the world now. But it's really striking to me how Western modern people take their souls for granted and don't seem to realize how relatively easily their souls can be yanked out of them, either in bits and pieces during their lifetime or, probably at the time of passing, over into some other world or into the eighth sphere for that matter. So I'm careful about, I'm very cautious about this whole thing, how we are going to pull through whatever it is that they're going to be throwing at us in linear succession or concurrently. and it looks more and more like concurrently. It's a hell of a lot for, and I'm particularly worried about the people of the first world who have not had the training of the poor people of the third world. In the third world, you can manage fine as a poor person. That is, until your economy becomes completely monetarized and you fall completely into the trap of debt, which is what's happening across the third world. But in terms of, ability to survive and to smile in situations of adversity, I mean, the so-called third world has taught me so much and has toughened me in terms of, okay, the relative hardship that my body can take, and how my mind and my sensitivities can work with this. Now, the business of going back to the Stone Age or becoming a third world country, it's the loss of all the trappings of, modernity, convenience, speed, just in time, abundant choice, generally convenience. That's, that kind of, hard knocks reality is, I think, a very useful, thing for relearning one's connection with oneself. I'm saying this based on my own experience. I came from Europe. I had, very well paid job, and I landed in a village in India, and not long after I relinquished my big fat job, applied for a scholarship to go and study music in India, and learned to live with $100 a month. And it was not a problem. That's, it's not a problem. How that, how the body of the modern people of the first world is going to adapt to this is going to have a lot to do with how they mentally and spiritually use this opportunity to alchemize the immense charge of crappy energy that is being thrown our way, which is, okay, it's a pile of manure that we permaculturists need to turn into good fertilizer, but in ourselves. So I think those people who've been doing permaculture in their environment, in their the land around them, can perhaps have an easier time adapting that concept to the permaculture of the self, of the subtle stuff of who we are. I've been going around in circles, I think. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Oh, no, in spirals. And this is such a prescient idea for people to understand. It's weird. I'm in one ear now. Anyway, I'll persevere.
Didn't that happen last week too?
No.
Okay.
Not, well, maybe it did, Jer. It may have.
Yeah.
Anyway, so dun dun dun. Yeah. What I see going on, Enna, here in the West, and I have lived very third world myself in a couple locations, and loved it. In fact, I think that was the happiest I ever have been, the most fulfilled I have ever been. And there is a part of me that is desperately trying to allow that to come back to me, but in an organic way. And so what I'm seeing here, and I apply those principles here because I think all my neighbors would think I'm a third world person from the looks of my yard and all this. I mean, I'm not society ready here at all. But I'm always, I think, probably an eyesore for everyone. And I'm fine with it. So that being said, I am observing, and energetically so, through my feelers, through my empathic nature, this collective and this is in context to where I am up in Washington State in the United States, this collective shift that is so major that everyone around is very unstable, and they're unstable for many different reasons. There's of course, all this stuff coming down over here in the West that is weaponized and very MK-like, at least trauma-inducing. And this is something I'm familiar with. My personal problems are just in my connection to the environment, which includes the emotional nature of those around in my city. Well, it's a town, in my town, and then collectively on. So if something's going on here, I pick up on it, and this is part of my morning routine. What is me and what is not me? And then I can navigate from there. However, the arc of this, whatever this is that's happening, does appear to be just so large and overreaching that one of the things that I'm noticing is the split in personalities because of this trauma. And I am personally viewing it, this is my own woo, but that because these personalities are being split through trauma, the things that are entering, the non-human things is what I'm calling them, whatever you want to call them, wherever you're from. I'm not a big Steiner person because I never really read Steiner, but I hear everyone talking about the eighth sphere. And to me, these things are very parasitical, whatever they are, and a product of an unbalanced system, even though the system has been manipulated to be unbalanced so that it could facilitate this. Now, a permaculturist or a naturalist understands these principles. You see it in your yard. You know, they tell me I can't grow thistle here, bull thistle, because it's invasive. I can't get more than 2 to grow because I've got a well-balanced space here, and it's not allowed to be. All the other healthy things in my environment allow me to have 2 bull thistles in my yard every year, and I'm grateful for them. And so when we start looking at this with the humans around us and with the cultural norms and the way in which these energetic fields are penetrating the traumatized people around us, I actually have been, and you know a little bit about me, I have been a little bit of an off balance state a couple times because I've encountered outside of my space some shocking, unbelievable realities that are looking monstrous, if you will. And I think that it seems to be more prevalent here in the West. And I do think that the West is being targeted more severely because of all kinds of factions. But I'm going to tell you, here's a boots on the ground thing, and it feels very dangerous. There have been murders in my town that never had murders. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy going on in my little town that's just unusual and out of nowhere all of a sudden. And this is up to and including with our beautiful wildlife friends and everything. There's something afoot that is affecting everything. And of course, I believe this is a high radiation event. I believe that, of course, the electromagnetics are a part of that because that is part of the radiation aspect. And then we're starting to look and see the grand solar maximum and all of the activity coming off the sun. There was an event here last weekend where the temperature jumped 30 degrees up, and we had this crazy, what felt like being a microwave beam. Now everyone is out in bare skin celebrating this high temperature, and I'm fully covered as usual. And I'm just looking at them going, the light alone looks dangerous. It looked dangerous, Enna. It actually did not look natural and looked dangerous. 2 days of it, and then it jumped back down 30 degrees to the normalcy that it is right now. And in that time period, I track these things. A lot of people started to get sick. Everyone's got this this chapped skin look, including me. I'm on to the brim hats again because I had a beret on, and my forehead is chapped, and I don't get into the sun. I don't trust it anymore. I trust my own internal sun. I don't trust this external one, and it's going down like that here. So I just wanted to present a bunch of boots on the ground kind of observations and see what it looks like from you across the realm and looking in, because I think people outside of especially the USA can see the difference between what it is inside it and outside of it. And if Jennifer Bruce is here, she's one like you who's lived in India and she's down in Mexico or South America. I don't want to give her exact space, but she traverses this similar kind of path and gives really great insight as to the perceptions inside and out, especially from a Westerner. You are a European. And so you at least were raised with those particular set of ideals and certain expectations as to what society is and what living is and all that, which is very much different from tribal life and more intimate relationship with the earth. So I'm throwing all that onto your table.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing generally is that we're going through a grand solar minimum, not a maximum. But so on the sun, I'm doing exactly the opposite of you. I feel that it's a different sun. It's for certain an absolutely different sun. And I'm the only one around here who goes who goes around half naked. And so far so good, basically. You know, this has to do with how each one of us manages the esoteric, meaning the subtle energies in dialogue between you, me, us, as you know, humans operating as antennas and information exchangers between, you know, the sky, the cosmos, and the earth. My perception is that while the sun is different in a strange way, which I don't feel as hotter than before, actually. My sense is that Earth is heating. The inner sun of Earth is activating like crazy. And, you know, my tree friends tell me the same thing. You know, I notice, for instance, that planting saplings has to be done much more carefully on the earth side than on the sun side. The extreme heat is very hard on the plants. You know, in the aerial part of the plants, the leaves are very, very sensitive. And I don't feel that it's a matter of the sun. I feel that it's a matter of giving them everything that is required inside the ground for them to have breathing space, you know, the right kind of, you know, the cooling effect of water, the right amount of, you know, charcoal, biochar, whatever you want to, you know, to put down there to get it just right. Because in this strange, you know, over 1 month phase of extreme unnatural heat, the big trees have done absolutely fine. They have not suffered at all. But I've noticed that they feel thirsty from below in a way that I've not seen in the hot season in previous years. So there's a different sort of interchange of energies between above and below, and how that operates inside us. And so, you know, if we are the exchange between what is above and what is below, we need to tune the whatever, the capacitor. Perhaps Jerry can help us with the vocabulary internally, inside our bodies, physically and subtly. That's what I'm finding from my own personal experience. As regards the environment on the people side, well, basically, out in the countryside, they've all received the injections, except for most people in my sort of extended family here. And, hubby, who watches the local news, tells me, and he usually doesn't, tell me what he sees on the news, but he tells me, oh, there's been this killing, oh, there's been that murder. We have started having killings in schools like you've been having in the States for quite a while. So I'm seeing the same program being used, mutatis mutandis, out here, but the violence is substantial. And, there's a lot of that kind of, murder. Probably not on the same scale as what you have in the States, because, the operation, the op, has not been, it's started more recently here. And the other thing is that, this is a Buddhist country, which, I don't like the word Buddhist to be self-explanatory, but basically these are lands of the middle way, and people are going to keep their balance as much as they can, especially in the countryside, until suddenly something snaps. They're not prepared. They don't have the preparation for when the onslaught of everything from every angle becomes too much for them. Psychically, they don't have. I don't think I can describe, in a way that would be non-judgmental. It's suddenly they snap, and I've seen this.
It'll be overwhelming.
I've seen this
for them.
often. But all of a sudden, I mean, now, in the past year or so, we've been seeing more and more of what you have in the developed world. So it's happening here too. But the animals are doing fine. I'm noticing that, animals are doing absolutely fine. It may have to do with the fact that, I am, as much as I can, alchemizing, doing the right kind of energy exchange within myself to keep my own balance. And this, I think, Nish, I think that, the best that we can do in these situations is do our self-preservation in a holistic sense that is, it's not just about me. My equilibrium depends on the equilibrium of everything around me. So somehow there is something that has to emanate from me that is pacifying for, the critters around me, the trees, as well as for the humans with whom I interact. Although, I mean, when I'm out here in my remoteness, I don't interact with very many humans. But basically, when I have to go to the big city to go and make money, I carry that with me. But in the big city, I feel very much like you feel. And, the minute I set foot out of my train that brings me to the big city, I feel this thing that sort of, a cloud of lead. If air were lead, that's, it just, it's absolutely awful.
It's oppressive.
I don't even, oppressive, but it's the contrast with nature, trees is just so absolutely, huge. And I notice the burden that trees carry in the big city. I mean, the amount of crud that they have to permutate, to alchemize for life to remain to some extent livable in the city, it's just phenomenal. So when I'm in the city, basically I'm talking to the trees mainly, rather than talking to people, apart from what is necessary for professional purposes. So yeah, I mean, Nisha, I feel what you're saying. I feel it very much. And I am certainly aware that you're getting it, orders of magnitude bigger than what we're having here. On the other hand, because I'm feeling what you people have out in the West, I'm feeling it here, creeping. I'm feeling what it's going to be like in a couple of years. And I'm just so grateful that I've been in training, for the subtle side of who we are, the natural, human, esoteric, as I like to call it. I've been in training for this, for long enough that, okay, I'm going to have to deal with this, both internally and externally, but it has to come from something somewhere inside me. And when that something somewhere inside me is operational, there are the powers of the weak forces of nature and of the goodness in other humans that responds and that cooperates. So that's my, it's not a terribly loud program. It's a very quiet program. But I do think that it's the quiet program that's going to get us through this.
Do you, when you're looking in on us over here, and this is a very open-ended question, but you're in a very different place, and you've just described a lot of those differences and the subtlety in which this, whatever's going on, is creeping into that space over there where you are. What do you see? Like, really, what and what are your perceptions of the Western world, the developed world, from where you are, so that people can get an understanding of that from a different perspective?
People in the West need to understand that they are weaponized internally. They are weaponized against themselves. I'm seeing this, ever since doing the second book, the Broody Blue book, and doing those non-practices. This has awakened in me a perception of how the Western mind has been weaponized in a way it's creeping here. It's very much a fact in the big cities, not so much yet a fact in the countryside. And I think the same applies around the third world. But the Western people depend on their mind to understand everything. And the thing is that the Western mind, the modern mind, has been stuffed with all sorts of information that altogether does not make sense. creates basically only cognitive dissonance. And people are trying, and very bright people are doing a phenomenal job working their way through all the cognitive dissonance and finding, bits and pieces here and there and trying to build a bigger picture. But they're in the mind, and they don't realize that the mind, no matter how bright, and perhaps because it's even stronger in the brighter minds, the mind has been weaponized against us. The demons, through the process that was journeyed through in the first book in Krivda, the demons have found the most brilliant trick to keep us from being truly ourselves as humans, full humans, has been to implant something of their mind in ours. And so, this makes it so easy to manipulate us from inside. And, that from that place, they can gauge our reactions to what they're doing to us on the outside. Every day I take my daily dose of what's happening in the West. I could switch off, and some people say don't overload yourself with all the negativity of all the bad stuff that's happening in the world. Well, I think not at all, in terms of a homeopathic kind of approach is to take a dose of the poison every day and alchemize it, to be able to decode it and to recover the perverted energy in oneself. So, yes. I feel into, of course, yes. I mean, I still have family in the West, and my family in the West, well, hardly talks to me. Perhaps one conversation per year, which, I just feel that silence as meaning it is crushing for me to feel how my people, my kith and kin, are disconnected from me, and I can feel what it is that does the disconnecting. And people call it whatever, normalcy bias and all this kind of, it's way deeper than that. And truly it is at a soul level. But as long as the Western mind is weaponized against itself, the Western mind cannot actually come to terms with the fact that we all have fragmented souls, that our souls are scattered all over the place, and that we really urgently need to recover, that those bits and pieces of what is the essence of what has taken an incarnation here. And so, it's because of that everything is separated cognitively. There's the body is here, the mind is there, the soul is out there. All these people who want to sort of, go out of body, who be, okay, let's get out of this meat suit as quickly as possible. I mean, this kind of thinking is just so, that really gets at me. I mean, that gets at my human soul, because my human soul is connected with the human soul of everybody else. So, and through that human soul, yes, of course, I can feel that all those other human bodies out there are having a really very hard time. It's really, it's absolutely atrocious. And, the only work that I can do is the inner work from, the dark or the invisible tunnels that connect, or the invisible threads that connect my soul to, many other souls of people that I know and don't know. And, that's through past lives and through all sorts of, stuff that happens when one is in contemplative practice. to operate from that subtle level and to try and translate elements of that into, books that can reach other people. But, like you, I'm a pretty private person. I'm not going to, go screaming all over the internet. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Let's look at this idea of the soul fragments. And you mentioned it twice now. And I think to get people on to an understanding, because I do want to make sure we get to the new book, but we're getting there. And so when we look at the soul fragments, there are a lot of people out there that understand, say, from a new age perspective, and you know how I knee jerk from that, what that is. So when you speak of these soul fragments and how easy it is through what we consider the birthing, deathing process to have them, how easy it is to separate the soul and how easy it is to fragment it. Could you elaborate on that so that people can find their way to your ground of understanding?
Okay. Now, in a nutshell, basically, I think, most of us and the people who will be listening to this understand that we are some kind of essence, non-physical, that takes an incarnation. And we call that essence soul. Soul is, it's not the same thing, in different other cultures. There again, we've inherited a particular concept of soul from the Christian religion in the West. So let's just call it, this soul, this essence, or understand that when we're using the word soul, it's this cosmic essence that may have a shape, may not have a shape. I'm exploring that in my contemplations, and I don't have a definitive answer, but basically, we need to be able to to be able to know the creative, generative abilities of this essence. The most powerful way to have that experience and to contribute to the whole of whatever, we call universe, cosmos, what have you, incarnation, physicality, is the most potent vector. And so, over eons and eons of time, this physicality of ours has been adapted, presumably with, all sorts of other civilizations' contributions in terms of genetic whatnots, and who knows what tremendous factors have come from all over the place to modify us and to modify the environment together with the power of Earth. Such that through each different period of existence, of life, especially on this planet, which is not an ordinary planet, not an ordinary little, piece of rock floating around in this corner of a galaxy. For these this experience of incarnation to interact with the essence, the soul, such that the soul becomes more talented at contributing to the totality in terms of creativity, co-creativity, different modalities of thinking beyond what we think is thought, different modalities of imagination, because beyond what we think is imagination. And we are now in a phase where our incarnations are hyper-physical, and where our programming, our mind and spiritual programming, is focused on this hyper-physicality, to the detriment of our perception of the subtle self that we are, that soul essence, and all the other subtle dimensions, entities, densities that interact with us and cooperate with us if we can speak their language that isn't our human language. So the soul, as I have, come to understand it, and this makes sense to me both rationally and esoterically. Our souls come from a place of beauty, harmony, creativity, love, all the good stuff out there. And, over the eons, there have been different phases of life on this earth that have been more benevolent or less benevolent, golden ages and Kali Yugas and things like that. So, right now we are in a harsh phase, but there's something in us, the soul in us remembers the golden ages and remembers what it is to be the soulless out there, not in incarnation, and strives to bring this into manifestation. But because it's fabric, it's stuff, whatever that may be in the subtle realms, is made of harmony, creativity, love, and all the good stuff. When its incarnation is tortured, or when its own subtle self encounters what we call evil in the subtle forms of evil, it shrinks back. It has learned fear. It's not only our minds and our subconscious that has learned fear, it's the soul that has learned fear. If lifetime after lifetime you've been tortured for being a heretic, or for being, this sex as opposed to that sex, or whatever, every time you get tortured, your soul detaches itself from the physical body. That's the first vector. And, the establishment of what we call religious institutions is predicated on human sacrifice of different types, on the extraction of energy in different forms from us from millennia ago. So it used to be experienced by our souls as mainly torture of the physical body. The physical body being an expression of the soul. So it is an aggression against the soul. The soul understands this, the body may not. But, when you're being, tortured by the Inquisition or this, that, and the other, your body is screaming and your soul is feeling it. Your soul is being tortured. So the soul is going to fly away, or bits of soul are going to fly away. Hence the fragmentation. And lifetime after lifetime, we come back with the memory of unresolved soul fragmentation from previous lifetimes. And this is going to express itself in this lifetime and in the next lifetime. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So the business of becoming whole again is it's not trivial, and it's, it's a very big deal, but it is entirely feasible. And my understanding of what we're going through now is that we're going through an extreme of everything, in the physical, in the subtle. They're deploying all their esoteric tricks against life, not just against us, against all of life. And our job is to keep, as I say at the end of the second book, is to keep the soul very close, very, very close, and to teach it to not be afraid. When our souls are no longer afraid, nothing can be done to us. But, our souls have been through these past millennia, at least, to learn what envy can do against the beauty of a human soul, against the actual mission of a human soul. And once we've learnt all the expressions of that envy, and the soul stays with the body that is the expression of it, then we're no longer split. And then, then the sky's the limit. I don't know, I'm not there yet. It's work in progress. It's work in progress. But, when you feel bits of soul coming back to you, but then you have to hold on to them. People will go in for a past life regression and something is going to be reconciled. The problem is they do not hold on to that piece of what has been reintegrated. That's the allopathic mentality. I've taken a pill, and so it's supposed to, have cleared my problem quickly, easily, without my having to do anything about it. No. It's a very proactive thing that requires very little activity. It requires attentiveness to, okay, I've just had a fantastic past life regression, whatever absolute horrors were done to me in the Inquisition. And I've resolved all that thanks to my excellent past life regression therapist. I feel great. I feel great for 2 days. I feel great for 1 week. And then it fades away because I'm not holding on to it simply with my attention, with my love for that new me who is reintegrated a bit more of me. It's difficult to explain in words, but it is a felt reality. And that's where this whole business of non-doing is. It is so, so powerful. And, I say this, I have to keep repeating that non-doing is so absolutely powerful because it enables all the subtle powers that may be dormant in us and that are right there all around us to come active again. I'm not going to say to come online because I don't want to use this, modern technological vocabulary for the realms of the subtle realms of what we call spirituality. But it's, and these non-doing, non-practices bring together the different elements of who we are, the physicality, the soul, the mind, the emotions. They all get reintegrated, by virtue of their own intrinsic, organic ways of operating. That cannot be, they cannot be described in scientific terms. They cannot be described in it's really difficult to talk about these things with human language. We can only give approximations. But this this business, the people who go about reintegrating bits of soul because they recognize that they are fragmented. I mean, they can feel it somewhere in themselves, but to try and do it through the agency of the mind, as long as it's the mind that is also fragmented and weaponized against us, within us, cannot happen.
Yes. And let's move into, I have a couple different ideas swirling round here. I want to touch upon what you talk about in the last book, being breathed. Can you put that down in a way that is tangible? And surely you do in the book, this beautiful book you've written. And I want to, with that idea, Enna, I want to look at the connection, the possible connection. So for me, I've been noticing that as I do this kind of work deeper, as I move deeper into this really natural state, you just let it happen.
Yeah.
I'm connecting into what I think we can agree in the collective possibly is epigenetic memory, where I'm able to traverse back as we're looking at soul fragments and all that. And I'm starting to identify patterns, and in very subtle ways, patterns where it could even be something as simple as something olfactory. Everyone understands how a scent can take you back to a certain place where you first had that encounter, or something simple like that. But I'm noticing something very deep churning in this, allowing, in the non-doing, you're allowing yourself to be breathed, in the stillness of it all, that there are, it's almost like a psychic gum machine where you unlock it and here comes your little gumball. And then so for me, it's a state of reward. And I could certainly see how for other people, this may bring back hard things from that pull and all that. And of course, those are very important as well. But the hard things I've never shied away from. The hard things are, to me, an opportunity. They're just telling me I need to play more of my love in that direction. And I don't mean love in the New Age way. I mean real, true love, which is can be ruthless. It's its own essence, and somehow it's been taking away from us through language, the idea of what real love is. And on some level, I think that's also an extremely personal experience that only you can have and only I can have. And, it's a very intimate thing. So what are your thoughts here with the epigenetics of it, and in praxis with non-doing and allowing yourself to be breathed? And I think there are people out there that won't understand those terms if they haven't read your book, because you've really brought this forward.
Well, then, I didn't, once again, I have to start with, I wrote this book, but basically it's, somebody
didn't invent this. You did not invent it.
I invented nothing. And somebody in the in my Substack page, this is not a book. And somebody else said, a book that shouldn't be written. So it's trying to transmit, like everybody else, on a deep path. We've read the poetry of great mystics and things like that. But those things, how do those things relate to, what is the ordinary human mystic? There again, my contention is, and has been for a while, from before writing this other book, that there is a natural mysticness in all of us, virtue of who we are at the soul essence level. And mysticism is also something that has been taken away from us, in particular by academia, where you've got all sorts of fantastic exegesis. That's a nice word. About this and that great mystic, and the things he says, and etc. But what about the ordinary mystic sense of all of us? And this is, you just mentioned the olfactory thing. The olfactory thing, okay, it will bring back perhaps that experience of the first time that particular scent, fragrance, or stench hit our nostrils. It also hit it hit the limbic system, and it hit. I don't think it's fortuitous or trivial that you mentioned the olfactory, because that's the most ancient, most archaic of our senses. And that's the power of essential oils. When you sniff an essential oil, it's going straight to that center in the brain that does all sorts of very interesting stuff, and not only in terms of sedating and soothing. It conveys huge amounts of information, but let's not go there today. Epigenetically, there's the epigenetic reality is true. It's true within a lifetime, but it's true also intergenerationally, and from lifetime to lifetime, where you're not always reincarnating in the same genetic lineage. So it's more than epigenetic. It's the thing we call our DNA. I mean, when they're talking about genetic and epigenetic, they're only referring to the 2 to 5%, depending on who you're reading or who you're listening to, that actually codes for protein, that actually does stuff that can be measured by the instruments of today's science. There's the whole rest of it that is, that used to be called junk. And there's this brilliant scientist, Russian, Pyotr Garyaev, that you may have heard about, who coined the term wave linguistic genetics, whereby he understood what we call DNA to be a linguistic code. It operates with its own understandings of homonymy and synonymy. So sorry, I that was a very loud chicken. I hope
Is it all right?
if you don't, okay, if you're not hearing the animals, I'm hearing them, and so I'm figuring, oh shit.
They don't bother me.
And they, no, but when they're very loud and sudden, right there next to my ear, they, and I'm on a difficult train of thought, and I'm trying to give a good answer to my friend Nish. Okay, so basically, Pyotr Garyaev, who, by the way, died not long ago, kind of at a rather young age. So, anyway, but basically, the thing that we call DNA and genetics is way more than what we call DNA and genetics. And actually, Garyaev, I'm going to jump straight to his conclusion, which is that basically it's the code of God, which of course puts us in the rather dangerous field of the word God, which means too many different things for us to be able to safely use the word God. But basically, it's the code of the soul, the code of the cosmos, the code of all sorts of stuff. And when we understand that, then it becomes, I think, interesting to consider that the epigenetics aspect of, okay, let's say you were fed only vegetarian food as a child, and this traumatized the actual body that you have, which is a carnivorous body. So you're going to have an epigenetic trace of that in this lifetime. If your grandparents were tortured and killed in Auschwitz, but well, one of them managed to escape and to survive, and thus your lineage is well, you're alive today, so that lineage is still alive. But you epigenetically, is it only epigenetic? I don't think so. I think it's part of that wider code. That wider code that I can no longer call just DNA. I mean, deoxyribonucleic acid. I mean, can an acid actually contain all that, all the traces, all the experiences, all the memories of lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes since who knows when? You know, perhaps for some of those that one of your friends called the primes, I think, you know, if we were there right at the beginning of the adventure of this planet Earth, then, I'm sorry, it's not, I'm not buying the fact that an acid can contain all that. Okay, I mean, code, I don't like the word code either, because it's, it's coding in computers, and it's codex alimentarius, and it's codes of laws.
Yes.
So I've been grappling with, what words to find. Actually, if Garyaev says it's the logos, it's the logos. Okay, I'm a bit more comfortable with that. And logos is not the word. Logos is the word, but the meaning, that particular meaning, word, stems from a far more complex concept, which is an organizing principle. So as an organizing principle, language, words have that power of, logos as being the word of God, once again, but in inverted commas. Now, how this would tie in with the whole business of being breathed, going back to the book, these considerations that I now have about DNA and logos come from, this non-practice of being breathed, where there's nothing of my own volition, nothing of my own imagination, nothing of my own pondering takes part in the actual contemplative practice of being breathed or being moved or being incubated, which are the three sort of practices, non-practices introduced in that book. So to go back to the genesis of the book, one day I was doing my regular practices, and I don't know what those practices were anymore. I've forgotten now that I've gone into non-doing. And something conveyed to me, be breathed, pretty forcefully. And I kind of, of course. My mind, it was so sudden and so obvious that I didn't have that split-second space to start questioning it. And I just fell into it. And, this experience happens to a bunch of people who read the book. But then the other aspect is to continue. We've had that aha realization that actually something is breathing you. You are not breathing yourself. I mean, the I that does stuff, decides stuff, doesn't control, there again, 90+% of what my body does. It's funny how we've got these same percentages. The measurable DNA is 2 to 5%. The conscious mind is 2 to 5% of the total mind. All the rest is the subconscious. Our bodily functions, it's perhaps 5% that we actually control, that we actually move, that we actually do. But most of what keeps our bodies alive is done, well, they say automatically by the autonomic systems. The breathing, the digesting, the this, that, and the other. That means that, there's a hell of a large proportion of us that does stuff that the 2 to 5% of us doesn't know about. So if you go into a non-doing attitude, such as being breathed, and you give your full attentive presence to it, you're not observing it, because that's a form of doing. You're just present for it and attentive to it and being completely with it. Then there is this immense realization, felt experience of this tremendous force that breathes me. And, after a couple of months of, being in this very blissful state of, okay, whoever you are, breathe me. Then it wanted me to perceive it further out from my body. And so, the only active part of me in the being breathed thing is that I put out a command, breathe me. That's what makes the difference. The difference is, it's not just pure receptivity. It's not pure passivity. These powers that imbue us with life force and can ultimately imbue us with the wisdom that is already dormant inside us. It's already there. They require us to recognize them. They require us in this incarnation to give them permission to do what they're already doing. But by giving them this permission, they are way happier doing what they're doing. When I say to what I call the spirit, and that I feel at my spine, because the spine is the strategic location of the body for any number of practices. When I say to it, not verbally, it's infraverbal, but that's another nuance that I don't want to bring in right now. Breathe me. There is this the presence of this power that breathes me is that much more perceptible to me. And the more I feel it, the more it does its job. And so, after the initial phase of having this, I can't call it a dialogue. I don't, this non-doing happening between my present, my conscious presence and the actual force that is breathing me, then, it it demanded that I should place that command, breathe me, not close to my body, but further and further away. And that's how I fell into my field. We all know, or most of us know, that we have an energy field around us. Heart Math Institute has shown us that it's, we've got this electromagnetic donut, toroidal thing all around our bodies, which is more or less big, depending on all sorts of factors. But when you start feeling it beyond the schematic image that you can get from a heart math picture, or that you can get from one of those diagrams that give you a rendition of the different energy bodies surrounding the physical body, you move away from those visual imprints, and you start having a felt sense of the field. That's really quite something, because when you start cultivating being breathed by the field that is all around you and in you, then there is a sense of bringing more of your essence back home, and at the same time of inhabiting this physicality with more of this essence. And this gives more meaning to the fact of being alive, having a human life on this earth now at this particular point in time, for a reason, for some, really serious reason, good reason. Not just having, I really don't like that expression of, oh yes, we are just cosmic souls having a human experience. Having an experience, it makes me feel like I'm a tourist. I've taken a package deal, to go and visit this or that country on planet Earth. Nah, it's way more than that. We've got real work to do here. And the more one, sorry, the more we have this sort of recohering sense of physicality and soul and sensation and emotions all coming together again, the more the reality, the pregnant nature of why we're here on Earth becomes compelling. So, that, I think, this particular thing informs everything that I've been saying from the beginning of this conversation, actually. We are here. We have these capacities. We have, I don't know how far it goes. I'm a beginner, and I, say very clearly in the book, every time I am in this non-doing, being breathed attitude, I'm a beginner. I'm always a beginner. The I that is incarnated in this particular body with this particular mind, I may say things quite forcefully when I'm, speaking with human language, but at that level of the I'm a child rediscovering who I am. And, this is, oh, look what I've found. It's it's a kind of treasure hunt. To me, it's as exciting as a treasure hunt, and every treasure hunt, you're always beginning afresh for every new treasure hunt. And it's at the same time the same treasure hunt that I've been on for eons. So, you put those different things together, and having a human incarnation is way more than, just some magical soul taking on a meat sack to have a human experience. All these cliches that they use are really, they're so damaging. They're so damaging, Niche. Anyway,
Yeah.
have I answered?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to expand this. And when we're looking at the idea of communication from this stance, from the nothingness, really, and how, for me, and it deepens. The more I let go, the more I am, and I know this may be a trigger word for some people, but the more I'm consumed by this really nothingness that is moving through, that is absolutely, for me, a sentience, but it has no form, it has no shape, it has absolute sentience, though. It has a flavor, and it's neutral as well. I want to make that clear. For me, it's neutral.
I agree. Yes, no, it is neutral. It is neutral. That's the whole point.
Yes. See,
that's a very important point. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I really want to emphasize that right now before I forget.
Go on with it, girl.
I've done it. Please, you carry on.
So, well, what I'm saying here is the level of communication I'm getting, and I'm only going to use this word again, these words, so that we can understand, but the level of communication I get from the field has become, I don't know, I feel like recently, in the last year, I'm understanding a language I did not understand before, but the more I understand it, the more I see that it's always been there, and that I was not able to hear it because I didn't understand it. So it could have played a static in the background, basically. And I think to call it a synchronistic language or anything like that is actually to belittle it in a way. It acknowledges it, but it still kind of envelops it in a realm of the mind. And the communication I'm getting from the outer field, which is truly because my inner field is allowing this, is substantial. Now, there is nuance here, of course, because I think that there's some level of fuckery going on when I move through and I get into the digital arena like we're in right now. And a lot of people talk about this, and it's very valid. And, I talk about this a lot as well. But I want to just make a separation between the digital aspect of it and the natural aspect of it. The communication I'm getting from nature around me, from my relationship with all the things in nature around me, my finches outside, that when they know I'm in this space where I am right now, they come, hundreds of them, to my window, and the hummingbirds come and they greet me, Enna. And I know that that's a communication. They didn't just synchronistically come to the window.
Yes, agreed. I don't like synchronicity either. It's another utilitarian, reductive idea.
Yes, it served a purpose.
Absolutely right.
It did. It served a really good purpose to get people to understand that there is meaning in the world around them when they start to recognize that signature. But it's so limiting. It's absolutely been weaponized too. It's weaponized into platitudes. It's weaponized into the grotesque language out there and movements of people. But what I'm talking about is the beauty of this interaction. And the deeper in I get, the more I'm starting to get a sense for what is happening to me. And I can only speak from where I am. And this is one of those things that when I was trying to understand past lives, I was trying to understand even past lives within this one life, all the hats we wear, all the clothing we wear, all the different yous. I had to start parsing it out in a way that everywhere I've ever been, I've been me. It doesn't matter if I'm a small Peruvian peasant man over there in the 1880s, or if I'm, Queen of Sheba. It just doesn't matter all the iterations, but throughout all my iterations, the thing I can recognize as I go deeper into this work is that everywhere I land, whatever that me-ness is, the I-ness is, it's separate from the id and all that, that I just recognize myself because I am open to understanding my own personal energetics. And I don't need a name for that. And it doesn't need to be in line with, say, the language, but the epigenetic memory. I just know when I encounter something that I have encountered previously in possibly another iteration or life, I have a sense for it. And now, as I do this work, that sense is actually giving me feedback because of my relationship with whatever those energetic fields are. Does this make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yay. Fantastic. But I think, yeah, no, I mean, the way you're going to experience it, the way I experience it, the way anybody else is going to experience it, it is extremely intimate, it's extremely private, and it's going to have different flavors for all of us. But when you talk about that nothingness that has sentience, it's a nothingness that is a fullness at the same time. I mean, there again, we're stuck with the words, and our modern languages, especially English, have lost the words that we used to have that would be both more elusive and more precise to denote that kind of other reality. So, we can only do our best with approximations and combining different words to try and make something that is cognitively dissonant to the ordinary flat mind, such that the other mind, the true mind that we have, is awakened, the mind that is connected with everything that we are. So, yeah, what you're saying is, yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. And the more we communicate, I mean, there is no, I suppose we could say, commune with, the beings of nature around us, and they commune back with us. The more we touch the essence of this undescribable thing that we call life, and I often find it crushing. Sometimes one bird will sing, I don't know, and I'm in a particularly receptive moment, and I'm just invaded with this bird song. It completely takes me over. And there again, it's both crushing and totally elating. How can you be both elated and crushed at the same time? But that's how I have to, use contradictory words to reach that point. There's that point where we can be who we really are, and express that through this physicality in, inter alia, with the struggles we have with, finding the words to try and convey these things. And then the most, perhaps one of the most magical realizations is that feeling that by being open to the presence of all these other energies, powers, life forces all around us, and by giving them simply our presence, just the presence, but nothing else, the presence, which is an expression of love, of the real love that you were referring to earlier, they come alive for us. And the more they come alive for us, the more we come alive for them. We are restarting the virtuous cycle of what used to exist eons and eons ago for us humans, and with us humans, and with this planetary being. And that's the other thing. It's the reality of the incredible being that has incarnated as this planet. And I think that you're expressing more or less the same thing as I mean, she's my main, interlocutor in that mute language that is not at all human language. She's my main interlocutor in my daily non-doing contemplation. And she craves that human attention to her in presence, not doing anything. And from that kind of communication, communion that we can have with her, will come more inspiration, new insights as to what we need to do, because we are here to do stuff in incarnation, in our environment, in what we call our environment, which is, it's the French word environ. Environ is what surrounds you, as if it were outside us. It's it's the milieu, it's the terrain that is both us and outside us and around us, that it's all mutually interpenetrating. And so that's another aspect of what develops with what I call the non-doing attitude, is this sort of this loving, harmonious interpenetration between us and everything else around us. And to bring this back to the beginning of our conversation, we become that much more flexibly solid in our interactions with the poisoned world around us. So yeah, I feel I'm going, I keep going around your questions. I'm not sure I'm actually answering. But basically, yes. I mean, I think in terms of what you described, you described so very beautifully, your experience of it. And I hope many others, I really hope many others are going to fall into this thing that is more than an experience. There again, I mean, the words fail it. Oh. But if the more of us fall into this and cultivate it in this non-doing way, where non-doing means non-willing, non-controlling, non-intending, non-imagining, just being present for what is inside us and outside us, that are all conspiring for the greater beauty of life and of what it is, that we are here to do on this earth plane. Yes.
And one of the things, and the deeper in I get, I guess, the deeper in, I don't know, sometimes I don't know which way is which. However, the thing that's becoming very clear to me, and increasingly so really by the day, is how different this experience is, it seemed to me, and this could just be a reflection of where I am and where I was not prior, but it seems to me that the process here, whatever it is, however we want to call it, whatever we want to say this is, this thing of life, including all this invading and nastiness that's in front of us that we do look at for balance. We must is it's individualized, and in the past it seemed like there was more of a congruence in the collective, and I'm now starting to, in a way, understand that as part of that mind fuckery, that mind trap, because I think it's always been an individual process. I've certainly understood that at different layers, but where I am with it now is that my process, which is a natural process, just like yours and anyone else's, is going to have its own expression because of my energetics, because of this olfactory here and that optical experience there, and, whatever. And so the thing I'm noticing is we've lost a sense of collective home base. And I don't find that scary personally, because I'm seeking the natural, I'm seeking the communication, and I'm not trying to manipulate it. I'm just, the most I manipulate is by observing, and which is a doingness, as you know, and then trying to translate what I see. And that's where, it can be very interesting territory. But I also have the soul of an artist, and that's part of what I do. I create from my experience, and good or bad, ugly or sad, it's all going to find a way in the world of expression, the way a mushroom, is a fruit of the mycelium network underneath. And so this individual process, I'm noticing, is going to be very, very particular towards each of us. And this is where I think possibly some confusion and continuity in this particular, let's say, drama that's going on that we are part of, and where it's going to be, I think, have that tinge of unhingedness, of something's coming through the wood, and we are all experiencing it differently and cannot find the language to coherently express it to each other. So our divisions seem to be deepening because of the breakdown of language, first of all, and the breakdown and fuckery of language, because in our lifetimes here, it's really been pushed. I mean, and we've talked about this, where bad means good, etc., right? All the slang and the individual intonations and syntax and all this.
Ignorance is strength.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where I think it's going to get interesting, Enna, is what you are experiencing and what I am experiencing, and trying to come together and say, are you observing this? So this is the doing, the observing is interesting. And so for people like us that tend to be more, I guess, gentle, I don't know what the word is. I'm open to other people's perceptions, and I look for them, and I like them, and I like the contrast. But what I'm noticing is a frustration going on in the collective, because a lot of what is being pushed is not being understood for good or bad. Like, we should understand that there are forces out there that are absolutely trying to cleave us from the natural world. And that's not, to me, a good thing. And so, because of this confusion in language, because of this soul fragmentation and this major overture that's happening that possibly has some sort of magical timing. And what I mean by that is when a seed is germinating, right? It's not on a clock, but it's on a magical clock, the right ingredients, the right amount of warmth and water, and it sprouts forth, right? There's a magical clock there of that sort. It has been manipulated. And the deeper thing I'm trying to say here is that as I've looked at how deep whatever this is, the lie goes, the one thing I've noticed that seems to be the biggest distortion that I notice nobody seems to really get on the same page is time. The idea of time, the concept of time, the functionality of time, the control aspect of time. And so I was wondering, and I know we're getting close to the end here, your idea of, or your, what can you bring to the table with this concept and how things are starting to play out now, how diverse our experiences are getting, and how this angry energy that we're talking about earlier is starting to present itself more openly and freely.
In terms of time?
Well, I think that is one of the things that is, I think the time aspect, the fuckery of time is actually giving this an edge. And so say for people on the grind of every day, get up, go to work, and, being pressed, using time as a tool of oppression by whatever beings or whatever it is causing a fracture in the collective. And that is affecting the language, and that is affecting different cultures and different ways of being. And I'm not talking like beautiful Sufi dancing. I'm talking like this is a fracture. People are at their limits because they have been fractured, they have been traumatized. And most of what I'm noticing is that the core component is actually time, the manipulation of time.
Yeah. Well, I think the first point, I've come to consider time as an energy of its own, and and of course you've got the relationship between time and space. Out in the eternal realms, if time exists, it's of a completely different nature because space is not what we experience in the physical realms here. So, how, I don't know, a star experiences time, of course, is completely different. Now, that brings to mind, macrocosm, microcosm equivalence. We are, and the mutual relationship between individual and collective. I mean, you've just packed so much into that one, into those, few paragraphs is just,
I'm sorry, darling.
basically, no. I mean, and you're absolutely right. But there again, I'm receiving that. I've already translated what you said into the nonverbal sense of it, where it is completely making sense. And then I'm having to struggle to retranslate, back into this faulty language. You mentioned the issue of translation. And this is absolutely crucial. And very, very few people, especially monolingual people, especially in the English-speaking world, who are not aware of how much their own only language has been bastardized and raped to pieces. So anyway, so you know, me being multilingual and having these non-verbal non-conversations with, you know, with the natural world, I'm extremely aware. I mean, it hurts. It literally hurts to have to use human language, but we have to do it. So, you know, we have to do our very best with the tools that we have. And so we're in a space now where there is the timeline, or let's say the time energy, with the particular spatial ambition of the demonic powers. Let's just call them that. The demonic powers that want to take over all of life and are intent on annihilating and or, you know, hijacking the human soul. They're operating on a very intense collective level now that we've never experienced before, because it's embracing the whole of the planet now. At the same time, this strategy is being implemented with diversified tactics, region by region around the world, or even within large countries. It applies differently within, you know, whether it's east or west. Okay, just look at the weather engineering. It's that kind of differentiated manipulation of the normal space-time frames of natural phenomena in the weather. They're collapsing certain things that should take a certain amount of time into a very condensed moment of time, or they're expanding things that should happen in a much more regular, sort of paced kind of fashion in the normal cycles of the weather, of climate. So, and you know, the same thing is happening in each one of us, physically, you know, emotionally, cognitively. There's also the time energy of the collective human soul, which, you know, people who are sensitive to this kind of thing, you know, we are sensitive to what is happening to the human soul, at least in the collectives around us, you know, in our respective physical locations. But, you know, from where I am, I'm also feeling it. I'm also feeling what's happening in the time energy of the Western nations. You know, and also Australia. I mean, that also includes Australia, New Zealand. So, and you add to that the particular timeline energy, or just time energy for each one of us, in terms of how the different time energies from the macro down to the micro operate. If one doesn't have a solid place in a contemplative practice, I mean, you know, this compression, distortion of time, I mean, it's not just compression, it's at the same time, it's distortion of time. It's different manipulations of the time energy that used to be sufficiently regular until 2019, apart from, okay, the big events, the 9/11s, the, you know, financial crash, things, you know, this or that war that impacted different parts of the world differently. It's all happening at the same time now in people who are completely unprepared for it. And frankly, I mean, those who do not have 30 to at least 30 minutes a day of completely quiet time for just being with themselves, and ideally, being with nature. Of course, I mean, people are going to go crazy. In addition to the effects, which are now, increasingly coming out of the effects of the injections, that they are changing people's psyche. They are changing people's.
Yes.
There's a very interesting paper from Thomas Mayer, who's been collecting testimony from different alternative healers who use subtle methods, who are finding that they're no longer feeling a soul present in the body that they're massaging or energy healing or whatever it is. So I mean, all of these things are converging, and yes, no wonder, but what we can do when we go into into our states of the fullness of the nothingness and the nothingness of the fullness is recover with, then we go into the dimension of time that is no time, or that is eternity, zero and the infinite. And I personally find that cultivation daily is the most important, I'm not going to say routine, but habit, from where I can perceive, I receive, like you do, the different time manipulation energies thrown at us and thrown at everybody else around the world. But I can carve out my own time energy that is congruent with the energy of that no time place, wanting to have its manifestation into this physicality through what I'm doing. So, and I'm saying this now from a state where I'm feeling good about all this. I'm comfortable. Like you, I have been through, over the past pretty much year, and even more so since the publication of the second book. I've had moments with, I can't describe. I mean, it was just, yeah, I just can't describe. And the only moments that were good were the moments when I would go and sit, in my non-doing.
Yes.
Where I would be breathed, and be moved by my body, and from which, once I had macerated, that's the other point. It's not that we are completely impervious and that we have become, definitively solid against everything. We still have to go through these tunnels of yuck. We still have to macerate in that stuff, with the staying power to macerate in that stuff, yet giving ourselves that daily moment, hour, whatever it is, depending on, whatever we can manage, of being in no time, in that other space of who we are, of what we are, in total communion with, with Earth and with the cosmos. And out of that maceration and the injection of that time of no time, there emerges, as you say, the new fruiting body from the mycelium. There emerges a new clarity as to, this is what I need to do, this is what I need to work on, and then there's the energy that we bring into it is cleaner and clearer, and it has an effect on the people around us. It has an effect. Well, I mean, there again, the communion with the beings of nature around us becomes ever more real and exquisite. And I find that there is this smoother interaction with people around me, and or a much sharper, more effective knife cutting through the bullshit. Way more effective than it ever was, and needing very few words. So yeah, I think there is all this distorted time. I'm not sure I'm answering exactly in the same key as what you were referring to. I'm responding to that from what I have assimilated, but it is definitely, time is an energy way beyond, the tick-tock time that we've got on the clocks. And I like to think that little by little, we're going to be able to reinfuse the real flavor of time energy into tick-tock time. But
Yes.
that's just me being a little bit crazy.
Well,
we don't have
that.
to do like TikTok dances to get into TikTok time, do we?
Oh,
So I just thought of this too. To
yeah.
summarize a lot of what you've been saying is something that Bruce Lee said in an interview, is to be like water, or be water. To just let it flow around you,
Absolutely. And that's another thing, in the non-doing thing, I mentioned it somewhere in the book. You get a completely different relationship to the elements. And so it's be water, be air, be earth, be fire, not all at the same time, but there are moments. Exactly, in what you've just said, and which brings to mind what I just said before that about, now I have a sense in my relations with others that when it's necessary, and I use the image of a knife, but there is this sense of a cold fire that just goes, it cuts through the bullshit. And then, I come out of that moment and I realize that, oh, I've never been like that with that person. And I realize afterwards that it was like, there was like a sense of the fire element that came through, and had to burn a piece of bullshit. And then, it's most of the time, I suppose, like niche, we are gentle people, and it's more like the water element. But sometimes the water element can be pretty torrential and tumultuous and flooding and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's the elements, actually. It's good to think of the elements not beyond, what we experience as fire, air, water, earth, as the physical things, because actually they too are the manifestation of a particular kind of soul or spirit essence that expresses itself in the in physicality as fire, earth, air, water. You know, air actually is in Asian cultures, it's wind. So it's the air in motion. And you know, that's all these are interesting sort of offshoots of the non-doing practice. You know, in non-doing, you can indulge in being the wind, being the water indeed, but being not the physical water, but being the being that expresses as water, the being that expresses air, expresses as fire. I mean, that's, you know, that's another interesting sort of, you know, little esoteric excursion. Yeah, and this brings me to the point that, you know, that book, it introduces only three non-practices, non-techniques. I mean, actually, those three are huge, and I usually do not practice all three daily because they're so huge. And they have also brought me onto, you know, other variations of non-practices. So that's another thing. When you were talking about Nisha, talking about the individual, um, you know, forms of realization that we shall be experiencing individually, there are all sorts. And I mean, you know, from what you've been saying, you've been expressing exactly this. There are all sorts of ways of non-doing that are open to us, and they will be, you know, variable from one person to the next, or for a particular individual from, you know, one period of life to another. So, you know, it's a wide open field. It's just so wide open. uh you know, I don't know how far it can go, but at least, you know, if people want to have more of a holding of the hands, you know, than what we've been saying in this conversation. I mean, you know, the introductions to at least the basic levels of those three non-practices are given in the book. And they really, I mean, from my ripe old age, you know, I can say that I have never encountered anything that was so transformative in terms of, you know, whatever practices one can do.
Yeah.
And, you know, who knows? I've done lots of things in my life. So,
Well,
yes.
I am grateful to have you in this space-time configuration at the same time. I love you, Enna Reittort. You bring beauty and love into my life through your work, through speaking with you on this level, through encountering you in the field. And I can't thank you enough. You are exactly what I look for out here in these wild lands of life. What are good ways for people to get your books and all that? And do you offer autographed books?
Well, before we go to the practicalities, Nish, I want to thank you because like last time, like the previous conversation we had, you you make me say things I didn't know I knew. And I mean, it is a coming together of friends on a level that I cannot name. I'll be happy anytime you want to have another one of these conversations. and uh, and you have my full admiration and empathy and whatever it is that could be required for what you're going through out there in your part of the Western world. It's oh. But you've got what it takes to alchemize this stuff, and yeah, I think you're an important beacon for people to listen to. You don't listen to a beacon, but anyway, it's like I forgot to mention, a light piece of, the olfactory thing. In old Russian, people used to say, they didn't say I smell, a fragrance or anything. I said, I hear a smell or a fragrance. I think that's kind of nifty.
Indeed.
Just on a little sort of kind of, you and I have a sense for the elegance of old things.
Yes.
I remember that from previous time. So I think, let's be listening to those fragrances and to the stench.
Yes. The
Anyway,
patina.
well, exactly. Now, I want to mention the fact that I have a Substack page that is absolutely free, where I either go further into detail on this or that aspect of the two books, and I, respond to questions. And I have just added another non-doing thing that refers to what people usually call the inner child. This is absolutely potent in terms of returning to wholeness. So, I shamelessly plug that page. Once again, it's absolutely free. I've been I've been applying that particular non-doing with the so-called inner child. I cannot say how massively well, transformative or delicious, what have you, it has been. So, I'd encourage people, if they're interested, they can go there. Because very often, once a book is published, oh shit, there is this, and it should go, it should have gone into the book. And, I cannot think for the time being of publishing updated editions. I've got more books which are banging ahead at my little pea brain. As far as getting the two books goes, they're available on Amazon. You can get the ebook, you can get the print version. I'm not sure how easily available they are on other big platforms. The first one, yes, Krita is available everywhere. Broody is probably available everywhere. It's on Amazon for sure. And if people want to support the author, they can order straight from the publisher, Book Baby, that works specifically within the authors and gives better royalties. Substantially better royalties, because I mean, if people knew, what Amazon serves back to authors. Anyway, but that's not the main point. That's just if a lot of people want to support my work, and so they go and buy at Book Baby. As regards signed copies, I send signed copies, but now in a purely gift economy sense, I will send signed copies to people who will absolutely promise to do a review to help other people find the books. I cannot monetize this. PayPal, that used to be, the convenient way to do this, no longer allows me as an individual in this country to have an account. So that's that. And unless people want to go and do I don't want to go through the banks either. I think, it's probably a nicer thing if people want to get an autographed signed copy. They can write to me through my website, Enna Reittort, .info, and use the contact page there. And if they're prepared to do a review, then they get a free copy with my signature.
And I put links to
And that's
your. Sorry.
But yeah, that's just about it. If you need, I can send links to you if you don't have them for the
No, I put the
Amazon page.
I put all those links into the show notes, to the description of the video.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you probably know more than I do.
This has been great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Hope to talk to you again sometime. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah.
Thank you too.
It's very nice to meet
You
you.
didn't do much talking. You didn't do much talking, but you do lots of listening.
I did lots of listening, exactly. I was being present.
And but did you get lots of fragrances? Listening to the fragrances?
I got a couple. I did. I think it was the cat, though. I'm not really sure.
That was a stench.
Okay.
Anyway.
Lovely being with you two. Really lovely. I mean, really, 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 one always has to be polite at the beginning and the end of these conversations, but I really, 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 really want to say a big thank you for spending some rich, tenderly tantalizing, ruthlessly gentle moments together.
Yes, indeed. And there will be more, Enna, between you and I. There is never ending. It's a never, there's a mycelium.
Because because this is food to my soul too, really.
So thank you, Enna Reittort, and everyone that was in the chat that Jerry was handling so well as always. So and thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome. Thank you. And again, thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with Damien Dumar, which should be an interesting conversation, talking about the harvest.
That's a barn burner for sure.
I know. I'm looking forward to it. Anyway.
All right.
That's all I got. Have a good night, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.